She was humiliated at the CEO's family Christmas dinner until he whispered, "Pretend I'm your husband." She only wanted to blend in at the CEO's family Christmas dinner. Instead, she was humiliated in front of everyone, cold stares, fake smiles, and questions meant to hurt. When the silence became unbearable, he leaned closer, took her hand, and whispered the words that changed everything. "Pretend I'm your husband." In seconds, the room shifted, the respect returned, and the shame moved to someone else. What started as a way to survive one painful night awakened feelings neither of them was ready to face, because sometimes pretending is the first step toward the truth. Before we continue, if you enjoy touching and inspiring stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Now let's get back to the story. She doesn't really belong here, does she? The voice wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. The way it sliced through the buzz of crystal glasses, silverware, and carefully moderated laughter made it land like a slap across Clara Montgomery's face. She didn't look up right away, not because she didn't hear, but because she wasn't ready to see who else had. The Hale family's annual Christmas dinner was a spectacle. The kind that made town and country flip through their contacts list to beg for photos. Waiters floated between candlelit tables, ornaments shimmered from a 20-foot tree in the corner, and yet, in all the glow and grace, Clara felt like a misplaced snowflake, already melting under the pressure. She'd tried to dress the part. Deep emerald green dress, long sleeves, modest neckline, her chestnut hair softly pinned back. The vintage gold locket at her neck, her mother's, gave her comfort, even if it didn't match the diamonds flashing around her. But comfort doesn't drown out cold eyes, and tonight, the air was full of them. Clara finally lifted her gaze. Across the table sat Margot Hale, Sebastian's cousin, blonde, thin, and sharp as ice. Her words had been directed to no one in particular, but her eyes made a beeline straight to Clara's. She wore a smirk that belonged to someone raised on power, and too many apologies never demanded. Next to Margot, a younger woman giggled into her napkin. "She's just the new head of archives or something, right? Sebastian brings his team to Christmas dinner now." More laughter. Clara's spine straightened, though her hands trembled under the table. The roast lamb on her plate remained untouched. She'd been trying to cut it when the whispers began, but now her appetite had vanished, like warmth in a draft. Across the room, a live quartet began a soft rendition of "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas." But all Clara could hear was her own heart pounding. She didn't belong, not to them, not to this family. Not to this world of quiet politics and inherited charm. And she knew exactly how this looked. Sebastian Hale, her boss, had invited her with the vague words, "You've worked like a miracle this year. Join us for the family dinner. It's time they saw who's holding our legacy together." She should have known better. Her job at Hale Industries was behind the scenes, organizing dusty records, restoring legal documents no one cared to read, tracing family history through letters and ledgers. She wasn't meant to be here, not under the chandelier, not across from people who'd rather she stayed invisible. She reached for her glass of water, fingers brushing the stem just as Margot's voice rose again. Some women confuse usefulness for invitation. Poor thing. She must think Sebastian's interested. The room fell too quiet. Even the laughter paused, uncertain now, as if everyone was waiting for a cue. That's when she felt it. A hand, firm, warm, gently brushed hers under the table. Clara blinked, turned her head. Sebastian? He hadn't said much since dinner began. He'd arrived late, slipped into his seat beside her, with a quick apology about calls running over. But now he wasn't looking at his plate or his cousin. His gaze was on her. Steady, unflinching, and then he leaned in, close enough that she caught the scent of his cologne, cedar, and winter citrus. His lips barely moved, but the words struck her like thunder. "Pretend I'm your husband." Clara's breath caught, His hand stayed where it was, not holding hers, just resting beside. Enough to suggest closeness without pressure. Then he turned, voice calm but strong enough to carry. "Margot, you're mistaken." Silence. He picked up his wine glass, eyes never leaving his cousin. "You assumed Clara was just my guest, that she doesn't belong. But Clara is family, my wife in fact," gasps. A fork dropped somewhere. Margot froze, her smile faltering into confusion. Clara's throat dried instantly. Wife? She blinked, unsure whether to protest or play along, but then Sebastian's hand gently brushed hers again. Just a touch. Reassurance. A silent question. "Trust me?" And she did. Somehow, in that exact moment, she did. She gave the smallest nod. Sebastian continued, now raising his glass. "We married quietly last spring, a private ceremony. The timing wasn't right to share, but, well, I suppose the truth deserves a toast." He turned to Clara. "To my wife." Every eye turned to her now. But instead of pity or amusement, there was surprise, and something she hadn't seen before. Respect. She lifted her glass, hoping it didn't shake too much. "To my husband," she said softly. Her voice didn't crack, not once. Sebastian clinked her glass gently. No wink, no smile, just quiet dignity, like he was protecting something sacred. Margot recovered quickly, but her voice had lost its bite. "Well, isn't that a revelation? How romantic and unexpected." Sebastian offered her a polite nod. Romance often is. Clara took a small sip of her water, her heart racing so loud she was sure others could hear it. What just happened? Across the table, someone changed the subject, awkwardly, to flights to Aspen. A waiter offered more wine. The moment passed, but something had shifted. The shame? It wasn't hers anymore. Sebastian leaned closer once more. "You okay?" She gave a shaky smile. "I think I'm supposed to be angry." He chuckled. The first warm sound she'd heard all night. "You can be, later." She lowered her eyes to her plate, then picked up her fork. For the first time tonight, she took a bite. The roast was cold, but it tasted like a win. "Why did you say that?" Clara's voice trembled, not from fear, but from the suddenness of everything. They had slipped away from the dining room under the guise of fresh air. But now, standing alone in the marble foyer beneath the golden sconces, there was nowhere left to hide. Sebastian stood across from her, hands in his pockets, jaw set with the same quiet authority he wore in every boardroom. But tonight, that control was cracked, just enough to let something human flicker through. "Did you want me to let them humiliate you?" he asked simply. Clara blinked. Of course she didn't. But she also didn't want this. "You told them I was your wife." Her voice dropped lower. "That's not something you just say, Sebastian. People will talk." "They already were." She sighed, and for a second, her shoulders fell. She wasn't sure if she was more angry or more afraid of how much she had liked it, the safety that came with his words. But before she could press him further, flash. A sharp burst of light came from the staircase above. Both heads snapped upward. Someone, maybe a cousin, maybe one of the photographers hired for the night, had snapped a photo. The man tucked his phone away, gave a guilty half-smile, and disappeared down a side hallway. "Do you think he—" Clara started. "He definitely did," Sebastian said, already pulling out his phone. No posts yet. But both of them knew how these things worked. Whispers traveled faster than truth. Photos, even faster. Clara exhaled hard, her fingers brushing the small gold locket around her neck. An old habit. Automatic, when stress bubbled over. She didn't even realize she was holding it until Sebastian looked down. "That necklace, it's old." "My mother's," she said softly. "She wore it until the day she died. Said it reminded her who she was when the world tried to forget." Sebastian tilted his head. "May I?" She hesitated, then unclasped it, and let it fall open. Inside were two faded photos, one of a gentle-looking woman with tired eyes and a knowing smile, the other, a little girl with chestnut curls and a crooked grin. "She raised you?" he asked. "Alone. She worked in a public library her whole life. She didn't own pearls. She had grace, the quiet kind." He looked at the locket, then back at her. "So do you." Those three words did something strange to her chest, not because they were romantic, but because they felt accurate. Not a compliment, a recognition. "Come on," he said gently. "Let me show you the winter garden. It's where all the decent people hide during these things." "You consider yourself one of them?" she teased, raising an eyebrow. He gave a half smile. "I try. Failing gracefully is a family tradition," she laughed. And the sound felt like a release. The winter garden sat off the west wing behind glass doors framed in ivy. Inside it smelled like eucalyptus and aged paper, an odd combination, but oddly comforting. A fire crackled in a small electric hearth. Two armchairs waited by a table already set with hot chocolate and butter cookies, slightly crumbled but warm. "Secret stash," he said as he poured two mugs. "The staff leaves it for my grandmother. She thinks the rest of us don't know." Clara sat, carefully, her green dress folding neatly around her. The locket, still open, rested against her skin. "Do you realize what you did back there?" she asked. He handed her the cup, then took his seat beside her, not too close, just enough to share warmth. "I stood up for someone who didn't deserve to be torn apart." She sipped her drink, rich. A little too sweet, but comforting. "You didn't have to lie. Would you have preferred the truth? That your boss brought you because you've done more for this family than most of the people in that room?" She opened her mouth, closed it again. "They wouldn't have respected that," he continued, "but they respect a wife, even a fake one." His tone was calm, but something behind it, a thread of frustration, or maybe regret. Clara looked away. She wasn't used to this kind of attention, not from men like him, not from anyone. She reached for a cookie, dry and a little too salty, but she ate it anyway. "Sorry to interrupt," a voice rang out suddenly, loud and theatrical. They both turned. Aunt Edwina, draped in sequins, drenched in lavender perfume, smiling like she'd just caught a secret. "Are you two hiding here to talk about babies?" she asked with a wink. Clara nearly choked on her sip. Sebastian didn't miss a beat. "We're negotiating dish duty. It's the real foundation of any marriage," Edwina cackled. "When you announce for real, I want to be the first to know. I live for this stuff." And with that, she vanished. They looked at each other, barked, and burst into quiet laughter. For a moment, the tension cracked. Later, in the back seat of the car taking her home, Clara's phone buzzed. New tag. "Sebastian Hale's secret wife? Who is the elegant mystery woman in emerald green?" She froze. There it was, the photo, her and Sebastian, her locket open in her hand, his eyes fixed only on her. It looked like love, real love, and it was already spreading. The next morning, Clara stood frozen in the lobby of Hale Industries. Usually she slipped through unnoticed, just another department head in neutral heels taking the back elevator. But today, every conversation paused as she walked past. Smiles turned into whispers. Phones stayed angled just slightly in her direction. And on the big screen in the corner, usually reserved for stock prices and weather updates, her face stared back at her, or rather, the face of the mystery wife. She was in mid-laugh, eyes soft, looking at Sebastian like he'd just told her a secret only they would ever understand. The now infamous photo had gone from a private moment to a top trending topic overnight. "It's kind of romantic, honestly," someone muttered behind her. "Romantic? It's hot enough to melt the Christmas tree in the lobby," another whispered. Clara kept walking. By the time she reached her floor, her heart was pounding like a warning bell. She went straight to her office, shut the door gently, and sat at her desk, trying not to let the heat rise to her cheeks. A few minutes later, there was a knock. It was Mara, Sebastian's assistant, sharp, efficient, and only ever knocked twice. Mr. Hale asked if you could join him in conference room 3. It's urgent. Clara nodded, stomach tightening. When she entered the glass-walled room, the atmosphere hit her like a wall. 3 senior PR executives, 1 legal advisor, Sebastian, and now her. They were already mid-discussion. We've got media requests from the Times, Business Daily, and 3 gossip channels, all asking for comment. Headlines range from CEO marries in secret to clerk to queen. Who is she? Said one of the PR women, her voice clipped. Sebastian didn't look at Clara right away, but when he finally did, there was nothing performative in his expression, just quiet presence. We don't owe anyone an explanation, he said calmly. But we do need to be on the same page. One of the executives leaned forward, arms crossed. Clara, is this real? The room fell silent. Clara blinked. The photo, he continued, it's intimate, very convincing. People are already speculating, not just about your relationship, but about whether you used it to gain access. To what? She asked, her voice sharp before she could stop herself. To influence, visibility, the board's attention, his. Sebastian's jaw tightened. Careful, he said, cool and low. That's dangerously close to insulting someone who's done more for this company than anyone in this room. Clara didn't flinch, but her hand slid to her locket again, opening and closing it beneath the table, like a rhythm that steadied her. The PR woman tried to soften her tone. It's just, you've kept a low profile since you started here, and now, suddenly, you're a public figure. I didn't ask for that, Clara said simply. I came to dinner because he invited me. I didn't create the photo. Someone else took it. I didn't make it go viral. No one spoke. Sebastian turned to her now, fully. Would you like me to correct the record? He asked gently. Clara looked at him. Would that make it better or worse? Both, he admitted. Probably. The meeting ended in a murmur of strategy and contingencies, with nothing fully decided. Back at her office, Clara found a paper coffee cup waiting on her desk. No note, just her usual order, with a tiny red bow tied around the lid. She didn't need to guess who left it. She sat slowly, the weight of the morning still pressing on her shoulders, but now balanced by the quiet heat of that small, thoughtful gesture. You okay? A voice asked from her doorway. It was Julian from IT, cheerful, too observant, always in a hoodie. Depends on what you mean by okay, she replied, sipping the coffee. Julian grinned. For what it's worth, that photo? You two look like you've been in love for 10 years. Kind of makes me want to believe in marriage again. Clara laughed despite herself. Well, don't believe everything you see. He tapped his temple. But I believe body language. And trust me, that man was looking at you like you were the gift under his tree. She shook her head, smiling faintly. But as Julian walked away, the words lingered. Later that afternoon, Mara returned. They've called an emergency comms session with you and Sebastian, board's request. Clara blinked. Why? Mara hesitated. Then, because one of the board members asked if this was a trap. Clara stood slowly, the air shifting. What do you mean? As in, did you seduce the CEO for advancement, reputation, money? They're framing it like concern, but it's ugly. Clara's throat tightened. They think I trapped him. Mara looked pained. Someone does, and they want you both to respond tonight. Clara didn't speak, just reached up and touched her locket, her mother's locket, once more. She wouldn't cry, not here. The boardroom lights buzzed faintly overhead, too bright, too cold. Clara sat at the far end of the long glass table, her spine straight, hands folded, as if posture alone could shield her from what was coming. Sebastian entered just moments after her, suit jacket gone, tie loosened. He gave her a quick glance, unreadable, then nodded to the board members seated opposite. 3 men, 2 women, all older, all guarded, and all watching Clara. "We've asked for this meeting," said Mr. Langston, one of the senior board members, "because we have a potential optics crisis." Clara didn't flinch. "Optics," Langston continued, "of a supposed secret relationship, of favoritism, of a deception that affects shareholder trust." "No policy was broken," Sebastian cut in. Langston ignored him. "We've had press inquiries, social media spinning theories. The question is, how do we control the story? One of our PR consultants has a recommendation." The woman to Langston's right cleared her throat. "Ms. Montgomery has 2 options," she said carefully. "She can release a quiet statement confirming that she and Mr. Hale are not in a relationship and that the rumors were misinterpreted, or she can take a personal leave and eventually step down." Clara blinked. The words weren't loud, but they felt like thunder. "Step down?" she echoed. "There's concern," the woman said gently, "that the photo implies impropriety, that perhaps you've crossed a line. Even if you haven't, the public doesn't always wait for facts." Sebastian stood jaw tight. "You're punishing her for my words." "We're protecting the brand," Langston said. "The brand." Clara swallowed the dry bitterness rising in her throat. "And if I refuse both options?" she asked. Silence. Then Langston leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Then we'll have to clarify your status publicly, and if that means acknowledging you misled the public, it could do more harm than good. For both of you." An hour later, back in Sebastian's private office, the silence between them was heavy. He stood at the window, arms crossed. Clara sat on the leather sofa, the locket in her hand again, opened now. Her fingers traced the tiny photo of her mother. The other side held a picture of her younger self, 6 years old, holding her mother's hand in front of a school gate. Her smile in that photo was toothy, uneven, and full of dreams. Now, she just felt tired. "You didn't deserve that," Sebastian said at last. She looked up. "You didn't stop them." He turned. "I tried." "Not hard enough," she said quietly. "You're the CEO." "You could have shut it down. You didn't." That landed. He crossed the room but stayed standing. "You're right." Clara didn't expect that. Not the admission, not the softness. "I didn't stop it," he repeated, "because part of me was afraid." She raised an eyebrow. "Afraid of what?" "Of how real it looked." That stopped her breath. He sat across from her now, hands clasped loosely between his knees. "When I told them you were my wife, it wasn't just to protect you, it was instinct. I looked at you, and for half a second I thought, if only it were true." The confession hung there, suspended in the soft hum of the fireplace. Clara looked down. Her hand gripped the locket again. "This belonged to my mother," she said. "She wore it every day until the hospital took it off. I put my photo in here because I didn't want to forget who I was before I learned to hide." Sebastian said nothing, just reached out gently and touched the edge of the locket. "Then don't," he said. They stayed like that for a long moment. No roles, no lies. Just 2 people caught in the mess of something that looked a lot like fate and felt a lot like choice. Later that evening, after most of the staff had gone home, Clara returned to her desk only to find another note. This time handwritten, "You deserve better than takeaway. If you're still here after 8, come upstairs, I'll cook. S." She almost laughed. The thought of Sebastian Hale cooking anything more complex than a black coffee was almost charming in itself. But curiosity won. His private suite was warm, dark wood, low lighting, shelves lined with old books and awards he clearly never looked at. In the small kitchenette, he was trying and failing to flip something in a pan. "You're really doing this," she said, amused. You doubted me? He asked, flipping the omelet, half of which landed on the counter. Clara covered her mouth, laughing. Let's agree you're better with mergers than eggs. I'm going for charm, not precision. He offered her the more intact half of the meal, placed on a real plate with real silverware. They ate on the couch, elbows brushing occasionally, and for a while said nothing. No press, no meetings, no pressure. Just two people, sharing a badly cooked omelet and something that felt like safety. When she stood to leave, he didn't stop her, just walked her to the elevator. Clara, he said before the doors opened, whatever happens tomorrow, this wasn't fake for me. She stared at him, heart fluttering somewhere between terror and tenderness. I don't know what it is yet, she whispered, but I know it wasn't fake for me either. The elevator doors closed, and for the first time in days, she didn't feel like running. But the next morning, the real choice would come. Clara barely slept. She watched the sky shift from ink to ash through her bedroom window, listening to the early sounds of the city waking up, car doors, morning joggers, someone laughing 3 floors below. Somewhere out there, people were clicking headlines that still showed her face beside Sebastian's. CEO's secret wife? From archives to aisle? Power or passion? She wasn't angry anymore. She wasn't afraid, just done with silence. At exactly 7:45 a.m., a knock came at her apartment door. She opened it to find a delivery tray, white linen napkin, fresh coffee, and a small plate of toasted brioche with butter and jam. Tucked beside it was a note. In case you don't eat when you're nervous, see you at 9. S. She smiled despite herself. No grand gesture, just quiet knowing. He remembered what she told him about skipping meals before big presentations, a detail so small, it suddenly meant everything. She sat down, drank the coffee, ate the toast, and made her decision. The boardroom looked exactly the same as the day before. Glass, chrome, power. Only now Clara didn't feel like she had to shrink inside it. The PR team was already seated, along with a legal advisor, and Sebastian at the head of the table. He gave her a quiet nod, not a signal, just presence. Ms. Montgomery, one of the PR reps began, tapping her tablet. Thank you for agreeing to this. We've drafted 2 versions of the public statement. I won't be reading either of them, Clara interrupted. Murmurs. She stood, adjusting her forest green wool coat, the one she'd bought last Christmas, during a 70% off sale, the one her mother would have called classic power. I appreciate the concern. But I didn't come here to choose between 2 versions of someone else's story, she paused. I'm going to tell my own. She reached into her bag and pulled out a printed statement. Single page, no branding, just her voice. She took a breath and began reading aloud. My name is Clara Montgomery. I'm the head of Historical Archives at Hale Industries, a role I earned early after restoring critical family records no one else touched. I'm not the CEO's wife. I'm not his secret. I'm not anyone's cautionary tale. I was invited to a family dinner after working for some time to restore the Hale family's legacy. I sat beside the CEO, and when someone tried to humiliate me, he spoke up. The photo that was taken showed kindness. Not scandal. I didn't leak it, I didn't script it, and I didn't benefit from it, but I also won't apologize for being there. I've spent most of my career so far invisible. That changes today. She folded the page. Silence followed, not the shocked kind, the listening kind. Even the board seemed caught off guard. Someone cleared their throat at the end of the table, possibly approval, possibly discomfort. Clara didn't care. Are you sure this is the route you want to take? The legal advisor asked carefully. It puts you at the center of the narrative. I already am, she replied. Now I'm choosing how it ends. She gathered her things, stood tall, and for the first time since her mother's funeral, she removed the locket from around her neck, not in rejection, but in release. She placed it gently in her coat pocket, like tucking away a memory. "You'll have my statement by noon," she added, "unedited." Sebastian stood too, "And it will go out with the full endorsement of Hale Industries." Their eyes met. No scripts, no pretense, just trust. Back in the elevator, Clara exhaled for the first time in hours, and then, "Mrs. Hale?" She turned. A red-faced intern stood in the corner, holding a stack of reports. "Sorry, I mean, Ms. Montgomery, I didn't mean... It's just... everyone... the photo..." Clara smiled gently. "You're okay. It's been a strange week." The intern nearly bowed. "I really admire how you handled that meeting. I'd have fainted halfway through." Clara chuckled. Fainting was on my list of options. The elevator doors opened, and she stepped out into a hallway of side glances and cautious greetings. But now, there was something different in those looks. Not judgment, respect. But what Clara didn't see just yet was the way her moment of courage was already beginning to ripple. Back in the boardroom, someone had left their phone recording the entire meeting. And while it wasn't clear who, the audio of her speech was already being passed around. An assistant sent it to a friend. A junior exec texted it to his wife. And before noon, a clip with the caption, "She didn't ask for attention, she earned it," was spreading on social media. And the world was starting to see her not as the mystery woman, but as Clara Montgomery. But not everyone was happy about it. Across town, Margot Hale stared at the video on her phone with narrowed eyes. "How convenient," she muttered. She clicked pause just as Clara's voice filled the screen. "I won't apologize for being there." Margot's lips twisted. "Then let's see how long you stay there." Clara wasn't prepared for what happened next. By noon, her statement had been posted to Hale Industries' official channels, unedited, exactly as promised. What she didn't expect was the avalanche of responses, not from tabloids or influencers, but from women, employees, archivists, quiet professionals who'd never been invited to family dinners. I've worked in this building 14 years. First time I felt seen. "That locket line?" I cried. She didn't marry into power, she restored it. Even the company's notoriously no-nonsense CFO, Ms. Bryant, stopped Clara in the elevator that afternoon. "Hell of a statement," she said, eyes sharp but sincere. "You didn't posture, you didn't fold. That's leadership." Clara gave a polite nod, heart racing. "Thank you," she whispered. She didn't quite believe it yet, but something had changed. They were no longer looking through her. They were looking at her. At 1 p.m. sharp, her office phone buzzed. "Lunch?" Sebastian asked simply. Not, "We need to talk." Not, "Another crisis." Just lunch. She almost said no, but something in his voice, quiet, low, a little tired, made her say yes. The rooftop terrace was mostly used by executives for rare donor events. Today it was quiet, the December breeze sharp but bearable in the sunlight. Sebastian had set out 2 takeout containers and 2 thermoses. A small makeshift picnic on a stone bench, far from chandeliers, boardrooms, and headlines. "You really packed it yourself?" Clara asked, half smiling. He raised an eyebrow. "What? You don't trust my culinary evolution after the omelet incident?" "Let's just say I brought backup granola bars," he laughed, a low, unguarded sound she wasn't used to hearing from him. They opened the containers, grilled chicken over warm couscous, roasted vegetables, and a simple rosemary roll. It was good, comforting. They ate quietly for a while, the city humming below. Then Sebastian spoke, not like a CEO, but like a man remembering something fragile. "My wife died 6 years ago. Her name was Evelyn." Clara froze mid-bite. She looked up, met his eyes. "She was kind," he continued, "brilliant, fierce when she needed to be. Cancer took her fast. We didn't get to do the slow goodbye." Clara lowered her fork. "I'm so sorry. I kept her name out of the press as much as I could. Not because I was hiding her, but because I didn't want the world turning her into a footnote in my bio. A silence stretched between them, but not uncomfortable. You're the first person I've told about her in years, he added. Clara didn't speak right away. Instead, she reached into her coat pocket and touched the outline of her locket. Still there, but unworn. I put mine away, she said softly. Not because I stopped needing it, but because maybe I needed to stop hiding behind it. Sebastian looked at her, not with pity, but with quiet admiration. You didn't just speak for yourself yesterday, he said. You spoke for every woman this place never saw. Clara exhaled slowly, the wind teasing a strand of her hair. I didn't expect it to feel like this. How does it feel? She looked at him. Like I'm finally standing in a room I earned my way into. He smiled. Good, because I don't want to be the only one standing beside you anymore. Her breath caught. Just then, as if on cue, a pigeon landed right between them, eyed Sebastian's sandwich, and snatched it before either of them could react. Hey! Sebastian stood up, half laughing, half horrified. Clara burst out laughing, real, unfiltered laughter, as the pigeon strutted off like royalty. Maybe it's a sign, she teased. You're better off letting someone else cook. That bird owes me lunch. By the time Clara returned to her office, cheeks still warm from laughing, the envelope was already there. No name, no stamp, just her first name, handwritten in black ink. She opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of folded paper. No header, no signature, but the words and the voice behind them were unmistakable. He's not what you think. Clara, he's protecting you now because it serves him, but he's done this before, and last time someone didn't survive it with her heart intact. There was a name at the bottom, just one word. Evelyn. But the handwriting was different, and Evelyn was gone. Clara read it again, then again, and for the first time since the photo went viral, her hands trembled. Clara read the letter 4 times before she could move. Her fingers shook, not from the words, but from the way they felt designed to hurt. It wasn't just what was written. It was the timing, the tone, the use of Evelyn's name, and the fact that no one signed it. She turned the envelope over again. No return address. No fingerprints that she could see, just her first name, written with too much familiarity. She tucked it into her coat pocket, where her fingers brushed against the locket again. That tiny, familiar shape had always grounded her. Tonight, it felt like an echo, distant, trembling. She didn't know what she was more afraid of. The possibility that the letter was true, or that it wasn't. And someone wanted her to believe it was. She texted Sebastian. C, can we meet somewhere quiet, not the office? S, anywhere. I'll come to you. C, there's a bakery on 3rd. Has a tiny tea room in the back. S, I know it. Be there in 20. It was one of those cafes that still smelled like flour and real butter, with low ceilings and mismatched wooden chairs, a place untouched by PR consultants or press photos. Clara chose a table in the corner, tucked behind a row of indoor plants. Sebastian arrived right on time, in a simple charcoal coat, his tie loosened, his expression unreadable, until he saw her. Then it softened. Hey, he said gently, sitting across from her. She slid the envelope toward him. Someone left this for me. He read the letter once, slowly, his jaw tightening as he reached the bottom. He didn't speak right away. It wasn't Evelyn's handwriting, Clara said quietly. No, it's not. But it was signed with her name. He looked up. I would never use her like that. Clara nodded. She believed him, but believing didn't erase the sting. Has anything like this happened before? She asked. A relationship? Misunderstanding? Someone you protected that didn't end well? He sighed, then leaned back. There was someone who came into the company not long after Evelyn passed. She was young, brilliant, and very lonely. We worked closely, too closely maybe. I tried to set boundaries, but she saw what she wanted to see. Did she think it was something more? Yes. And when I made it clear it wasn't, she left. I never spoke publicly about it. I never blamed her, but she wasn't okay for a while. And now? She lives overseas. As far as I know, she's rebuilt her life. Clara let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. So this could have come from her? Or someone who knew her? Someone who wants to reopen a wound? She reached into her coat and touched the locket again. I don't want to doubt you, she whispered. Then don't. He didn't plead. He didn't try to convince her. He just sat with her in the quiet, letting her heart decide. A small boy in a red coat wandered past their table, dragging a toy dinosaur. He stopped, pointed directly at Sebastian, and said, with total conviction, "You look like Batman." Both adults blinked. Then Clara laughed, startled, soft and real. Sebastian leaned in slightly. "Better than Lex Luthor." The boy's mother scooped him up with an apology, and the spell was broken. But something lighter lingered in its place. They shared a pastry, sipped tea, and Clara felt herself beginning, just beginning, to believe that whatever this was, it might be worth trusting. But when she returned to the office the next morning, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. She passed 2 assistants in the hallway. One smiled too quickly. Another averted their eyes. Her steps slowed. She turned left, not to her office, but to the security team's desk. "Can I see the footage from yesterday?" she asked. "Outside my office. Just after noon." The man hesitated. "Technically, we're not supposed to release that without—" "Sebastian Hale said I have full access for internal security purposes." The guard hesitated, then frowned slightly at his monitor. Legal and security already flagged your credentials this morning." He blinked, then checked his screen. "Okay, here we go." She watched the footage in silence. 11:58 a.m., a blur of people in the hallway. 11:59. A woman in heels walks by, slows, and slips an envelope under Clara's door. The angle wasn't perfect. The face wasn't visible, but the coat, cream-colored, belted with a fur collar, was unforgettable. Margot Hale. Clara stood in front of her mirror that morning and stared at the chain in her hand. The locket felt cool, smooth from years of wear, a quiet inheritance from someone who had always told her, "Hold your ground, especially when no one expects you to." She hadn't worn it since the night everything changed, but today? Today, it was going back on. She fastened the clasp with calm fingers, not for protection, not for nostalgia, but as a statement. Margot Hale's office was perched like a throne above the rest of the floor. Tall windows, antique rugs, and an assistant who wore her schedule like armor. "Ms. Montgomery," the assistant said politely. "Miss Hale can see you now." Clara nodded, stepping through the tall glass door, coat open, locket visible, expression unreadable. Margot sat at her desk, legs crossed, perfectly composed, porcelain mug in one hand, sleek glasses in the other. "Well," she said without looking up, "this is a surprise. I was just reading your fan mail." She gestured toward her tablet, which displayed the trending article about Clara's public statement. "The woman who didn't flinch?" Clara didn't smile, didn't bite. "You left a letter under my office door. Signed with your cousin's dead wife's name." Margot set her mug down delicately, raised an eyebrow. "Did I?" Clara took a seat without being invited. I watched the security footage. "And here, I thought you liked history, not surveillance." Margot's voice was sweet, but her eyes were calculating. "Measuring?" "It's a dangerous game," Clara said softly, "trying to rewrite someone else's life. And what exactly do you think I rewrote? You tried to make me question Sebastian's integrity, his past, maybe even his heart." Margot tilted her head, amused. "Oh, Clara, you think this is about you?" She stood and moved toward the windows, gesturing dramatically toward the skyline. "This is about control, about the company, the family name, The legacy he's letting you turn into a love story for the internet. Clara remained seated. No, this is about your fear that for once, the story doesn't have you at the center. Margot laughed, but not fully. It was more reflex than joy. You're good, she said finally. Better than I expected. Just then, a sharp bark echoed through the room. A small white terrier came charging around the corner and jumped onto Clara's lap without hesitation. "Percival!" Margot hissed. "No, down, off!" But Clara only smiled gently, stroking the dog's head. The animal immediately calmed, tail thumping happily. "He's not very good at reading tension, is he?" Clara said. "He's a terrible judge of character." "Maybe he just sees people for who they are." Margot pursed her lips and retrieved the dog, placing him firmly on his embroidered pillow by the chair. "Do you know what your problem is?" she asked. "You think I have one. You're a threat wrapped in humility, and people love that, especially people like Sebastian." That name, spoken with so much venom, didn't scare Clara. Not anymore. "He loves substance," Clara said calmly, "and that's something you can't fake, no matter how many press releases you edit." Margot's mouth twitched. "You think you've won something?" Clara stood. "No, but I stopped losing myself. That's enough." Margot opened her mouth to reply, but no words came out. That, Clara thought, was victory. As she stepped out of the elevator, the front lobby was quieter than usual. Most staff still at their desks. Meetings in full swing, she felt lighter. Not triumphant, just honest. Then the voice came from behind the revolving glass door. "Ms. Montgomery?" A woman stepped forward, stylish coat, notebook in hand, a press badge half tucked into her bag. Clara froze. "Jessica Moraine, the Herald. Can I ask you a few questions about your relationship with Sebastian Hale?" Clara didn't answer. "Specifically," Jessica continued, "do you know anything about a former Hale Industries intern named Elise Marlowe, and why she left the company shortly after working under Mr. Hale?" Clara blinked once. The name meant nothing to her, but something in her chest tightened anyway. The name echoed through Clara's mind as she walked back into the archives. Elise Marlowe. The journalist had said it like bait, like a door opening to something deeper. Clara hadn't taken the bait. Not publicly, but it lingered like cold air through a cracked window. She hadn't asked Sebastian about it, not yet. Something inside her needed to see first, to know on her own terms. The archives were familiar, rows of old files, project binders, paper trails that told the real stories of people trying to leave their mark. Clara slipped into the corner office, her quiet sanctuary, and powered up the old database system. Still running 2 versions behind, but reliable as a heartbeat. She typed the name, Elise Marlowe. 1 hit. An employee profile. Intern, Public Affairs Department, 2017. Assigned to 2 projects. And then, nothing. Termination date, November 9th. That was less than a year after Sebastian's wife had died. Clara pulled the personnel folder from the physical cabinet, a thick envelope tucked between unrelated files, as if someone had wanted it to be harder to find. Inside, standard internship forms, project notes, a photo ID of a girl no older than 21, bright smile, tired eyes, and a handwritten letter dated the day she left. Clara hesitated before unfolding it, but then she read, "Mr. Hale never misled me. I misunderstood the boundaries of mentorship and kindness. That is my burden, not his. Please do not involve him in this resignation. He protected my dignity. I want to leave with his protected as well." Clara sat back slowly. The letter didn't match the warning in the anonymous envelope. It didn't sound like a girl who had been wronged. It sounded like someone who had made a mistake and chose to leave quietly. So who was using her name now, and why? A knock on the archive door pulled Clara from her thoughts. It was Millie, her longtime colleague, sharp-witted and terrible at whispering. There's a very tall distraction heading this way, Millie said, eyes wide. You might want to, check your lipstick. Clara smiled despite herself, just as Sebastian stepped into view behind Millie, raising an amused eyebrow. Should I be worried about my reputation down here? He asked. Your reputation is what got us trending on LinkedIn, darling, Millie shot back. Then slipped out, still chuckling. Sebastian stepped inside and closed the door gently. I was hoping you'd say yes, Clara blinked. To what? He pulled a small invitation from his coat pocket. Dark green cardstock, gold foil lettering. Annual Hale Foundation, Winter Gala. Formal invitation, Clara Montgomery. It's next Saturday, he said. I'd like you to come with me, not as a PR move, not as a shield, just as someone I trust. Clara looked at the envelope in his hand, then back at him. You're sure that's a good idea? No, he said honestly, but I'm sure it's what I want. Her throat tightened. That's a lot of pressure for a +1, she said lightly, trying to steady the air between them. It's not a +1, he said. It's you. He handed her the envelope. Their hands brushed briefly. Not accidental. Later, after he'd gone, Clara sat at the archive table with a cup of bitter vending machine coffee and a small Tupperware of ginger cookies she kept for long nights. She bit into one, the spice warm, the sweetness subtle, comforting. The envelope sat beside her, and the file on Elise remained open. She gently closed it, filed it back in its rightful place, and paused before locking the cabinet. She glanced at the security folder beside it, the one where Margot's name had first shown up in surveillance logs. Something clicked. She pulled it out. Inside, there was a note, not part of the formal system, typed, precise, cold. One more nudge and she'll fall. Just remind her he's done this before. It wasn't addressed to anyone, but it wasn't meant to be found. Clara's fingers stilled. This wasn't about Sebastian. It was about her. Back at her desk, Clara slowly reached for her locket. This time, she didn't open it. She tucked it gently beneath her blouse, close to her skin, where no one could see it, where only she could feel it, a quiet kind of strength. Because now she understood, the attacks weren't just about love or lies. They were about silencing a woman who had finally stopped apologizing for being visible. The Hale Foundation's Winter Gala was an institution, held each December in the rooftop conservatory of the city's oldest hotel. It dripped in elegance and expectation, a silent auction, a string quartet. Plates so fragile, they looked carved from snow. And this year, Clara Montgomery would be walking in on Sebastian Hale's arm. That alone was enough to ignite whispers before the hors d'oeuvres had even cooled. But Clara wasn't here to dazzle. She was here to stand. In the hours leading up to the event, too, Clara stood alone in the quiet dressing room the foundation provided for female speakers. The hotel suite was softly lit, her gown hanging on the back of the door. Emerald green, again. It wasn't planned, but it felt right. Like she was picking up the thread where everything had unraveled weeks ago. This time, the dress wasn't about blending in, it was about showing up. She fastened the locket around her neck, not hidden, not tucked away. Visible, centered, hers. Downstairs, in one of the side lounges off the ballroom, Sebastian waited beside a small tray of canapé samples, picking at them like someone preparing for battle. Not dinner. When Clara walked in, he stopped mid-bite. You really are going to destroy my ability to speak in public, he murmured. She smiled. You've given a TED Talk in front of economists. They weren't wearing that dress. She sat beside him, picking up a tiny smoked salmon blinny. So this is the secret prep room, she asked. It's the donor escape room. If anyone asks you to fund a sculpture shaped like a tax write-off, you can hide here, she laughed. How long before they notice you're missing? 15 minutes, max. 20 if I'm lucky. Then we better eat. They shared bites, savory, delicate things that barely counted as food but still made the nerves settle. He watched her as she chewed. "You're not afraid, are you?" "I am," she admitted, "but fear doesn't stop me anymore." He nodded, slow, thoughtful. "Stay close tonight." "Because you need saving from bad conversations?" "Because I'll need reminding what matters." Her hand paused over the last pastry. He didn't press. They finished their tasting in comfortable silence. And then he offered his arm. The ballroom was glowing when they entered. Dozens of heads turned at once, and didn't turn away. Cameras clicked discreetly. Eyes narrowed or widened. And at the center of it all, Clara, steady beside Sebastian, the gold locket resting against her collarbone. They made it halfway through the crowd before the first wave of greetings swept in. A senator, a business mogul, a designer with a name Clara vaguely recognized from fashion magazines. Sebastian smiled, shook hands, said all the right things, but every so often he looked back at her, not as if checking, but as if centering. An hour in, the lights dimmed. A short speech, a round of applause, a soft melody from the quartet, and then, as if choreographed by something older than planning, Sebastian reached for her hand. "Dance with me?" She hesitated, not because she didn't want to, but because everyone was watching. "Yes," she whispered. He led her to the center of the room, one hand on her waist, the other holding hers gently. They moved slowly, in rhythm, not to impress but to connect. There were no steps, no tricks, just presence. And when he leaned in, just enough for only her to hear, he said, "I've wanted to do this since the dinner. I just didn't know it until I saw you stand up for yourself." Her throat tightened. "You make it easy to forget how many eyes are on us," she said. "Let them look." The locket caught the chandelier's light as they turned, soft gold against green silk. And in that moment, for the first time in her life, Clara didn't care if the world saw her, but the world had other plans. Near the dessert table, a phone pinged, then another, and another. Sebastian's assistant walked briskly toward them, whispering something in his ear. His expression changed, not panic, but alertness. "What is it?" Clara asked. He pulled out his phone, his jaw tensed. "An email. From your company address? Sent an hour ago." Clara frowned. "I didn't send anything today." He showed her the screen. Subject line: Private agreement between Clara Montgomery and Sebastian Hale. Confidential. Inside, a fabricated chain of messages suggesting Clara had agreed to further the romantic optics in exchange for influence and board consideration. A fake, but polished, targeted, designed to spark doubt. "It's already being shared," Sebastian said. "Carefully, internally, but it'll leak by morning." Clara's hands went cold. "Someone spoofed my account. Someone wants to destroy your credibility again." She met his eyes. "And yours." He nodded slowly. "We've been too polite," he said. "That ends tonight." Clara stood at the window of her apartment just after midnight, still in her emerald gown, the soft weight of the locket pressing against her chest. The gala had ended, the fake email had spread, and so had the truth. Sebastian had acted fast. "Pull every login attempt under her name," he'd ordered. "Now!" While guests murmured and staff scrambled behind the scenes, Clara had stepped forward on that ballroom floor, head high, voice steady, and said the words that cut through the speculation like glass. "I didn't write that email, and I never traded myself for power." No dramatics, no denial, just truth. And then an unexpected voice backed her up. "She's telling the truth," came Ms. Bryant, the company's CFO. Everyone turned. "The metadata in that email's header was faked. I confirmed it myself," she said. "And I have security footage showing Margot Hale's assistant logged into the communication server 30 minutes before the message was sent." There it was, the lie exposed, the sabotage revealed. Margot had slipped out before the confrontation began, but the damage was already hers to carry, and Clara. She had stayed, not to defend herself, but to finish the dance. The next morning, Sebastian showed up at her door with a paper bag of pastries and a tired smile. "It's not apology food," he said, "it's gratitude food." "Gratitude for what?" Clara asked, stepping aside to let him in. "For staying. For not running. For making them hear you." She watched as he unpacked a box of croissants and a carton of orange juice like he was preparing a peace treaty. "You could have fixed it all yourself," she said. "You didn't need me to speak." "I didn't need to. I wanted to." They sat at her kitchen table, steam rising from their mugs. "Toast," he offered. "Can you make toast without nearly setting off my smoke alarm this time?" He grinned. "Probably not." She laughed. Full and easy now, the tension of the night behind them. When the toast was finally edible, barely, they sat in the quiet morning light. There was no media outside her window, no urgent calls, just the soft clinking of forks and the quiet flutter of a new beginning. "I was terrified," Clara said, "not of what they'd say, but of what I might start believing if I kept hearing it." He looked at her carefully. "What do you believe now?" She thought for a moment, then met his eyes. "I believe in what I saw in that room and what I see in you." He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. Not possessive, not performative, just there. "I've wanted to tell you something since the night I lied and said you were my wife." Clara tilted her head, intrigued. "And what's that?" "That I've never been more honest than I was in that moment." Her breath caught. "Sebastian, I don't want to pretend anymore," he said quietly. "I don't want to use proximity to shield you from them. I want to be near you because I'm already in love with you." The words didn't feel rehearsed. They felt lived. Every glance, every cup of coffee, every defended silence. Clara didn't answer right away. She stood instead, stepped to the window, fingers brushing the locket once more. "My mother wore this when she was alone, when she had to be strong," Clara said, "but I don't think she meant for me to wear it forever." She turned around, unfastening the clasp gently. "Strength is knowing when to hold on and when to pass it forward." She crossed the room and placed the locket in Sebastian's hand. "I'm not walking away from who I was, but I'm not hiding behind it anymore." He looked down at the gold in his palm, then up at her. "I don't want you to give up any part of yourself. I'm not. I'm choosing who to share it with." She smiled, quiet and certain. "And yes," she said, answering the words still sitting in the space between them, "I love you too." 3 weeks later, Hale Industries sent out a public statement, not to apologize, but to celebrate a new department, the Clara Montgomery Center for Historical Integrity, led by its namesake. At the press event, Sebastian stood beside her, proud, equal, no drama, just a man who knew the value of keeping promises and a woman who finally believed she deserved to be seen. That night, as snow fell softly outside the foundation's glass atrium, Sebastian turned to Clara and whispered, "Marry me?" "When you're ready. No pressure, no performance, just when it's time." She didn't answer right away. She leaned into him instead, resting her head on his shoulder, and whispered back, "Let's just keep dancing." It had been 3 winters since the dinner that changed everything. The world no longer spoke her name with speculation or curiosity. Now they said it with respect. She had kept her name for a long time, until one day it felt like a choice, not a surrender. Clara Hale, yes, she had taken his last name, not because she was expected to, but because he asked in the right way, gently one quiet morning over hibiscus tea. While she sat by the window, reading a letter from the archives, he handed her a small velvet box, no speech, no theatrics. Inside were 2 things, a simple gold ring with an inscription on the inside, "No more pretending," and her mother's locket, restored and polished, now holding two new photos. On one side, a smiling photo of her and Sebastian in the garden, sunlight pouring between them. On the other, her mother, still in her rightful place. They married that winter in a restored barn surrounded by old friends, quiet music, and one long table overflowing with warmth, not wealth. Clara wore an off-white, long-sleeved gown and carried a small bouquet of eucalyptus and dried lavender. There were no choreographed dances, no dramatic toasts. Only hands held, eyes steady, and vows that sounded like this. I see who you are. I love all of it, and I choose it, again and again and again. And after that, what came the seasons. They now lived in a small stone cottage outside the city, nestled between crooked trees and an untamed garden. Clara's office sat in the attic, full of plants, paper, and the scent of old letters. Sebastian taught part-time at a local university and served on the board of the Hale Foundation. He had learned to like early mornings. He still hated public speaking, and yes, he still burned toast at least once a week. Clara had become the founding director of the Clara Montgomery Center for Historical Integrity. She hosted writing retreats for women whose stories had been overlooked for years, led workshops on storytelling and memory, and still, in quiet hours, cried softly over forgotten letters that crossed her desk. That morning, snow was falling slowly outside their kitchen windows. The fireplace crackled, the kettle whistled. The smell of something baking filled the house. A miracle after 5 failed bread attempts and 1 scorched countertop. Clara sat on the sofa with a blanket over her knees and a small velvet box in her hands. Sebastian entered with 2 mugs of tea and a knowing smile. Today's the day? Clara nodded. I think so. He didn't ask more. He didn't need to. Inside the box lay the locket, still holding her mother's photo. But now, on the other side, a different face. A girl at maybe 7 years old, with chestnut curls, big brown eyes, and a mischievous half-smile. Elena. They had met her through a mentoring program 2 years ago. What began as temporary turned into something permanent and sacred. A daughter they didn't plan for, but somehow had always been waiting for. Last week, Elena had asked about the necklace. Is that the one you used to wear when you were scared? Clara had smiled. It's the one I wore when I had to remember who I was. Elena had looked at her with all the weight children carry when they understand more than they say. Will I ever need it? Clara replied. Maybe, but only when you're ready. This morning she was. Clara gently closed the box and set it aside. She'll take good care of it, Sebastian said quietly. I know. They sat in stillness as snow began to gather on the windowsill, as if the world outside had paused to honor the moment. Clara Hale knew that happy endings didn't come wrapped in perfection. They came in pieces, sometimes painful, sometimes slow, built over burnt toast and brave choices, built over words spoken in ballrooms and quiet kitchens. But she also knew this: when love is chosen, freely, daily, and without performance, it stops being a fantasy and becomes a life. A real one, the end. What would you do with a locket like Clara's? Would you wear it to remember your strength, or pass it on to someone you love? If this story moved you even a little, leave a comment. What did this ending mean to you? Rate this story from 0 to 10 in the comments, and don't forget to like. Share and subscribe for more stories where love is slow, earned, and unforgettable. See you in the next story.